talking about the World Bank. That's, but I hope not to bore you because it's not so much the inner workings of the World Bank, but I want to talk about some exciting trends that's happening around the world. And I think it's important that you're all aware because this is affecting and will affect even more in the future. So I hope this will be worthwhile. I'm not going to bore you, but I'm going to start with a very, very boring slide. So let me ask you first, does anybody know the difference between the World Bank and the IMF? What's different? It's like a red chocolate and white chocolate, right? It's coloring. What is it? What's the difference? Silence. It's okay. I think it's very confusing. Not many people know the workings of these two institutions. So the easiest way to describe it is that the IMF is like a firefighter. They go around the world and put out economic fires. So if a country is burning, like Greece or Korea even in the late 90s, Eddie knows that very well. Then IMF goes and it tries to act as a injection of emergency funding for a country level. It's more of a firefighter. It also puts early warning systems all over the world, so they monitor, to ensure there's no fire. So it very much act like the fire department for the world. The World Bank is more like the structural civil engineers. They go and ensure that the buildings are solid, that if there is a fire, they will be able to stand it, that it is built properly so there's no fire. So the World Bank's mandate is development, is long-term development, sustainable development, in a way that to make countries stronger to develop. But essentially, that's the difference. They were built after World War II to reconstruct Europe. So they have a development mandate, and slowly they became more focusing on developing countries. So it's a big organization based in Washington, D.C., all over the world. And the World Bank actually is 5 different entities. It's not just one entity. IBRD is International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. This is the World Bank that most people know for, which is it's direct government-to-government lending. So the way the World Bank works, and my class is probably tired of hearing this over and over again, but the way it works is that it borrows, actually it gets money from each country, 180 plus shareholders from all over the world, and use the money, goes to Wall Street and raises additional capital. Because it's a AAA bond rating, it can borrow money very cheaply from the capital markets. And then it lends to the countries with projects and below market rate interest rates and concessional lending to governments. So that's essentially how the World Bank operates at the IBRD level, government to government, large projects of infrastructure, health, education. Not so much health actually, much more education and improving the financial systems of countries. So that's IBRD. IDA, it's very similar to the World Bank, the IBRD, but it focuses on the poorest of all countries. So there are about 50 of them, very low-income countries, and it does very much similar thing, but with interest-free lending. So no interest on the, it's not grants, you still expect to get the principal back, but it's pretty much interest-free for those 50 countries. IFC, this is where a lot of my experience in the recent years have been. It has a different legal mandate. We can actually invest in companies. It acts very much like an investment bank. So it goes around the world and it operates in a very similar manner with debt and equity. So you can do lending to commercial companies and also can acquire shares of companies, and you can do very complex transactions with companies. So that's IFC. So what's the difference between IFC and investment bank? Well, if you put it in a good way, it's an investment bank with a heart. You can be cynical about it. Basically, we have IFC is a very, very big advisory component where you ensure that your investments have development impact. So, but it acts very much through commercial channels, and the rates are not below the market. It's always lent at market rates. And the reason for that is that if you start lending below the market, you start destroying the market at the commercial level. So it's always lent at the market. And one big role of IFC is that when a country is in transition or is very fragile, when there's no private capital coming in, usually IFC is one of the early investors, so that it shows and catalyzes investment, so that so people like Eddie Hungry come in because there is some proven investable companies there. So that's a lot of the role of the IFC. MIGA is essentially multilateral investment guarantee agency, is an insurance company for political risk and other risks that companies face when they're going into dangerous or difficult countries. So if there wasn't for that type of insurance, companies would not go in. So that agency was set up so that it will facilitate private investment in difficult environments. And the last is ICSID. Basically, it is a dispute resolution mechanism for disputes, commercial disputes. Okay, now that you are experts on the World Bank, we're going to talk about the fun stuff. So, one of the really interesting things that's been happening in the past few years, and this is partially, I think you can just look all around, and a lot of the impact in society has been, a lot of the interesting movement has been led by the private sector. And there's an emerging trend of a lot of private sector actors for impacting development in society. There has been a lot of demand for consumers for responsible products. And this is why the Aston brothers are here. So there has been a lot of shift in some of the wealthiest families in the world, where there's been a shift in the guard of family offices, where billions to trillions of dollars has been managed from the old way of doing, of making money and giving to a new generation of family office heads. They're millennials like yourself, who are not only looking for a profit, but also a way to make impact. So there's been a tremendous shift globally in terms of what the owners of capital are demanding. That has created the likes of the Just Business, the business like Casey, and even Economics and Mutuality. Some of the biggest Wall Street firms like Goldman Sachs and KKR, they now have sustainability policies. Why? Not because they're really wanted to do it, but because their investors are demanding. So there's been a huge shift. It's happening right now in terms of how capital is being deployed. And the World Bank has paid notice. And the World Bank has, in the past year and the past 2 years, especially last year, he has explicitly shifted his entire strategy into a mobilizer of capital rather than implementation of projects. This is really happening as we speak. By the way, just to be clear, I should have disclaimer, I'm not representing the World Bank, even though I'm here, and I'm speaking in an unofficial capacity. So MFD, the Maximizing Finance for Development, has several components. One is the billions to trillions approach. What does it mean is that every year, the World Bank spends billions of dollars in actual projects. Now, to address the SDG, the Social Development Goals gap, you will need trillions of dollars. So there's a huge gap of trillions that the World Bank alone and other multilaterals, they cannot address. So you need other ways of addressing the gap. And the interesting thing is that there are trillions of dollars in private capital available with interest, a lot of them with an interest, to make social impact. So this is a huge trend. And so the World Bank explicitly is stating that instead of World Bank doing this by itself, it wants to be the standard setter and mobilizer of other people's capital to achieve the development. That's the only way to do it. That's the only way to achieve the SDG goals. So as we speak, he has moved from an implementation of projects to mobilize private capital. It's happening right now. So, I won't bother with all the details, but these are the 4 elements, different elements of how now the World Bank is considering projects. Now, our friend back there has mentioned how does the World Bank decide the project. Here we go. These are the new way. This is the new way how the World Bank is deciding projects. Obviously, the standard way of doing things, which hasn't fundamentally changed, is for countries to issue a poverty reduction strategy paper. Every country would issue a strategy paper to the World Bank, and the World Bank would reply with a country assistance strategy document. So we will respond to that for each country. So every country has a strategy. That hasn't changed. But as a matter of within the World Bank policy, this is the new way of doing things within that structure. First of all is there a commercial solution to a particular social problem or development problem? So if the problems are lack of roads, instead of World Bank going there and jumping into building a big road project, can we find a commercial investor and interested in developing that road? That's the first question. Is there a private solution? If there is, we're going to walk out. Now, if there isn't, then why? Why there isn't? Is that a policy problem? Are the investors not coming because there's something wrong with the policies? This is actually a project I was involved in last year in Panama, another project in Panama, where we asked the commercial banks how much you're lending per year. And one bank said $500 million on infrastructure projects, all in debt, in commercial debt. And are you doing any equity lending? Are you purchasing any companies? Or are you working in partnership with state-owned agencies to own shares of companies? And they said, no, we're not. Well, there's no PPP law, or public-private partnership framework, and that's strong enough in this country. So we asked them, if we had a PPP policy or framework with clear rules about what happens if there's a dispute and so forth, would you be able to invest in equity? Absolutely. They said, easily we'll double $500 million into the economy per year. It's one bank. So by doing the policy reforms with a better PPP framework, you're literally adding billions of dollars in the economic system. This is upstream reforms. So you didn't have to do any development project. Just by doing a little bit of policy work will probably cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're adding billions of dollars in the economy. So this is the upstream. And then, after checking the upstream markets, and that's not the case, the next phase we ask is, can we put risk management instruments? So if the issue is not policy, but the banks are not participating because they're reluctant, because it's a new area, what do you do? And the risk management instrument, these are things like first loss guarantees, financial instruments that would allow a lot of the commercial capital to be deployed. A lot of times, companies are reluctant to go in because it's lack of insurance. That's what the media is. It's lack because it's a new country, So they need to demonstrate that it's possible. Or what if I lose my money? So some insurance on investment risk. So you have different financial instruments that can be deployed instead of doing a road project or instead of jumping into an actual development project. So that's another layer of instruments that you want to put out there before jumping into a project. So again, you're doing everything you can to mobilize private capital. You're doing everything you can to do that. So you're not jumping into a public project. Okay? And finally, if that doesn't work, then you consider more of a public project, a concessional project. Is that clear? So this is a major shift. Again, we want to do everything we can to encourage the private capital to come in. So this strategy is creating a lot of buzz in the last spring meetings and fall meetings. That now a lot of investment banks, Blackstones and others are coming to these annual meetings because they're becoming very much interested in being part of this. So the development landscape at the micro level is changing. So we talk a lot about the micro. This is a microcosm of the reasons why at the micro level the global finance is changing. So it's the energy that we're trying to capture here. It's having a real effect at the global level. So let me have a little bit of back and forth with you. What do you think that some of the opportunities and challenges in this new strategy? You heard it. What's your reaction? Too good to be true? It's a good idea? Makes sense? What's your reaction? What do you see some of the opportunities and challenges of the new strategy?
I think one opportunity is we can make market efficiency high because actually before world banks use usual public cashes, that means they can make some the countries make the ventures can be bankrupt easily because the because other countries public cashes is more stress because if, for example, they can lend the money more lower rates than other native lending companies cannot compete with that company. So I think that if using the cascade approach, the market efficiency will be higher.
I think you said two things. Yes, it will make the markets more efficient. You're removing market failures. So yes, it is. It will make markets more smooth and efficient. Just to be clear, the IFC does not lend below the rates. For companies, it's always market rates. It's the government-to-government lending that is below the rates. The governments can borrow from the World Bank at cheaper rates. Okay. So one of the challenges I'll mention is that right now there's been several pilots with this MFD approach, and it's been mostly on infrastructure. So infrastructure is very clear. It's very easy to follow the cascade. But the challenge now is to apply this in other sectors, like agribusiness. So I think that the jury is still out there on how well this works in other sectors. It also has to do with the internal organization of the World Bank. As a whole, we're all trying to get used to this new way of thinking. And large organizations have a way of life of its own. And moving together in this direction internally is not always easy. So the jury is still out there, but these are some exciting trends within the World Bank in terms of really following where the private sector is going. So these are some exciting trends, and this is not really a crazy hippie movement that's happening on the bottom. This is really becoming mainstream, and yes. So just want to share this, and if you have any questions about how the World Bank works, or I'm here to take some questions.
So I have one question regarding the cascade model. For the second step, which was upstream information and market failure. Okay. So what's the specific role the World Bank actually does? Like, it's policy stuff. It's what the government's in charge of changing the policy, making the policy so that they can actually respond to like investments much better. So is the World Bank role like convince the government to change their policies, or like what is the actual role of the World Bank to affect the second step of the cascade?
So it's the World Bank. It's usually respond to requests from governments. So as I mentioned before, governments will give the World Bank their strategy on how to develop their development strategy, and the World Bank responds with World Bank strategy for that country. And it could be jobs, it could be competitiveness, it could be water issues. So depending on the country, it will respond to these topics. Right? And you will have a dialogue. It's called policy dialogue. So you go back and forth, and different experts from the World Bank will go into these countries, and you have this dialogue with the government and develop this long multi-year projects. Normal lending operations, the government will borrow from the World Bank to do infrastructure projects or water projects, energy projects, and so forth.
So they're basically advising the governments on how to make like policies better for.
Not only advising, but lending as well. You will have actual projects on creating roads. So it used to be, so this is why the cascade is working. It used to be that government wants, we want some better infrastructure, so the World Bank, would you give us $100 million in lending so that we can implement these roads. Now we're saying, let's hold off a little bit, let's see if there's anybody else who could do it instead of us. And so we have to go through the cascade step before we can justify the World Bank itself lending to the government. Does that make sense? So let me show you a little bit about, what are some of the non-traditional ways of the World Bank has been working and experimenting. I wouldn't say this as a result of the cascade or MFD, but now this type of project I'll mention is becoming more important. Because these are much more private sector led, more innovative. So this is a project that I led in Jamaica, where looking at this Caribbean country, we looked at what type of products or industries that the island of Jamaica will be has the most potential to grow. And I went through a sector prioritization process where we prioritize sauces and spices and coffee. Blue Mountain Coffee is one of the best coffee in the world. It's actually Jamaican. Really, really good sauces coming out of Jamaica. So there's a whole methodology behind it, but at the end of the day, we prioritize these two products. And one of the things we've done is mobilize a group of companies, 10 sauce processing companies, and we created a long-term relationship building process, facilitating working group meetings for a period of 2 years. And we brought buyers because the companies told us that what they really needed was market access issues. So we brought a group of buyers from the US, chefs, we brought chefs, we brought these specialty gourmet buyers, tea porters, and they spent 1 week in Jamaica. Winter in DC, they spent this 1 week just going through Jamaica, meeting with local chefs, meeting with the companies, and they gave us tons of market feedback. And that feedback essentially became a work program for the next 4 years. This is different than sending a consultant to a country, consulting with different stakeholders and coming out with a report, and this is the program. This is very different. This takes a lot more work and patience, and a lot of people don't like it. Because why are you taking so long to come up with this report? So there's a lot of resistance towards this type of participatory approaches. But when people see the results, it's fantastic. It's much more locally owned, and the net result of this is that they created a consortium company on sauces. And my students know that Jamaica is one of the lowest trust countries in the world. So we have actually a survey on trust level, talking about low social capital. So it was very hard to get people together. And actually this process allowed them to create a company to access the US markets. So the IFC in this particular case, this is the International Financial Corporation, the advisory side, it played more of a neutral broker role, where it brokered the conversations between different actors, especially the companies. And some of the financing activities that included certification. And certification processes, for many of you know, are expensive. It's expensive to hire experts, but it's even more expensive to change the layout of your factory so that the sauces can be world-class and can be exported. Those are millions of dollars. And a lot of companies didn't have that kind of cash flow. And the banks were reluctant to lend. So what could be done? We offered the banks a guarantee facility. A first loss guarantee will cover you $1 million per company for the first loss. And that kept the banks interested. And you see how they can scale up the price? So instead of direct lending to the companies, the IFC has a more of a role of giving financial instruments to manage the risk for banks, and the banks that will allow the banks to lend to the companies. So the ultimate goal is to get the funding from the banks to the company, but IFC doesn't play a financial role. It plays more of a instrumental role of providing the risk management instruments to the banks so that the banks can lend. I know it's late in the afternoon, but so this is just an example of how the new ways of doing development is being celebrated. These things were happening before, but because of the cascade, it's getting a higher profile. So that's that's. I want to just share this example with you. Okay. All right. Any final thoughts or questions?
Thank you. In terms of mobilizing private capital, it wasn't mentioned in your presentation, but I was quite interested in development impact bonds, which I believe were launched first by the World Bank. And I was wondering if you had any insight you could give us to its progress so far,
Yeah.
especially in terms of being able to attract investors.
Yeah. There is actually a lot of interest within the World Bank on development impact bonds. So for those of you who don't know, it's a way of using government or development funding to set up, these are actually bonds, but you separately set you find some kind of social problem. So the usual problem that people use it is the prisoner incarceration rates in the UK. Actually, one of the pioneers is the Sir Ron Cohen, and in the social impact bonds. So he saw a social problem, which is incarceration rates pretty high, and he set up, and the government was spending £100 million per year, or something like that. And instead of government spending, why don't we set a £50 million impact bond facility, where if somebody else found out a way to reduce the incarceration rates, will reward you with the will trigger the release of the payment of the bonds. So it's a very innovative private sector solution. There's some metrics. So I think a lot of the leadership has really come from the private sector, but the World Bank has been some of the early experimenters, not necessarily adopters, but experimenters. It's still a bit of the experimental phase. So it's within the World Bank. There's some pilots here and there. I think it very much fits into this new cascade strategy. So it's part of the many different things that's going on within the World Bank. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.